Yeah, not really. I got to update that. We get to that in a few weeks. We also don't. This whole week 4 is off. I used to actually teach this as a 1-credit class for 4 weeks. So this was the end already. It was insane. It was so intense. I'm glad we got to go to 2 credits and longer. So let's just talk about printing from home, because I heard, Andrea, you said you print at home because this sucks so bad. We are getting a new printer. I said it. Yes.
Rico 2.
No. Hanukkah. And it's going to be a good one, and I'm super excited. Super excited. And I have to make sure that it costs a certain amount of money, and I'm like, yes. I don't have to go for the cheapest piece of crap anymore. Anyway, I digress.
Tell us how you really feel.
And that's all recorded. Great. Well, I've been asking for 5 years, and it's been in our budget for 5 years, and it just gets forgotten, and it's frustrating because in InDesign you'll have issues with it too if you haven't already. Yeah. So, printing at home. Anybody have a good color printer at home? What brand do you have? Canon? HP? Okay. So, Canon, Epson, HPs all do a really nice job. I have Epsons and I absolutely love them too. I know they're good. The trick with those is using their ink, usually, sadly, and their paper, or good paper, because they know how their inks mix on their papers and go through their color profile. So to get the very, very best, quite honestly, you should use their paper and their ink in their printers. They have different kinds of papers. They have the velvet fine art paper, for example, Epson has. It gives it a kind of a velvety feel. They have some that are more textured, kind of like a canvas. They have the premium luster, the super glossy, all those different things. And if you're really wanting to do and spend the money, which if you've already bought their printer, their ink, and their good paper, why not also go on to their website and look for color profiles of their specific paper? Because as we know, white isn't all the same, right? White paper, you pull up copy paper compared to another piece of paper. So they know the color profile of their paper. They know how the inks are going to react with it, if it's got a gloss on it, if it's matte, if it's kind of that textured, the ink is obviously going to soak in and spread out more than it would on other papers. So if you load those profiles and have them in Photoshop and on your computer talking to your printer, you're going to get the absolute best quality. And you can get some extremely beautiful, stunning pictures at home on gloss paper and wide format. You can get up to, I think, well, without going crazy, I think mine could do 11 by 14 or 11:17 on hard stock paper, hard gloss paper. So it's pretty cool to be able to do that. Cost of the ink and the paper is high. You wouldn't print a whole bunch of them at home, but you certainly could print a few. All right. Getting prints from a lab. Does anybody send out to have actual prints made? Yeah, and we should, right? How many of us have a million pictures on digital file and haven't touched them or looked at them? Kind of forget about them. It's kind of sad compared to going through boxes and boxes back in the old days. I can tell exactly when I got a digital camera when my kids were young, because I have boxes and boxes of photos, and then all of a sudden they don't. They disappeared. They went digital. So making prints is important. Where do you guys get them made? Where do you print, Logan? Which one? MPix, absolutely. Awesome. They're one of my favorite. That's actually a Scott Kelby company, the guy that wrote all of our books. Love it.
My parents wanted the most recent kids' school pictures that I take.
Yeah.
And I got them printed at Walmart. They came out great.
Really?
Yeah.
Gray or great?
Gray.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Really.
Yeah.
I'm just like, here, you can have these, but I'm going to get you better ones.
Yeah, absolutely. MPix. Letter M, P-I-X. I'll share it with you, I think, in this one or in another one. Exactly. MPix is awesome. Bay Photo is awesome. And another one that I used for senior pictures that I absolutely loved was WHCC. It's White House Custom Color. It's out of Minneapolis. Super fast turnaround. Stunning. I mean, that's where photographers send their stuff there. It's not a Walmart. And I'm going to see if I can find it when we get to that section later in this class. But somebody sent their file, digital file, to Walmart, Walgreens, MPIC, Bay Photo, whatever, and did side-by-sides of them all. Same file, totally different output. You know, the places that are true photography places are color calibrated. They know their paper specs, they know their ink specs, and they're going to look the absolute best they can. So you get what you pay for, but every now and then just getting something at Walmart is really what you want. You just want a quick print too. So you can upload your files, you can take them to a Target or a Walmart. If you were going to take a bunch of pictures, say you wanted a bunch of 4x6s from your trip, at home you can take the time to edit the ones that you want and custom crop them to 4x6 inches. Because again, I think we've talked about how your camera records at a certain pixel dimension and it's more square. It's not squarish, but it's more like this usually. Whereas a 4x6 typically is going to cut off. It's more wide than it is tall, and you're going to lose parts of it. If you control what part you're cropping, like up here is what I want, down here or whatever, you get what you want. If you don't and you take it to a Walmart, they either give you this middle strip or they give you this top strip. But whatever it is, it's not always what you expected. Like I got pictures back, I'm like, why is her head cut off? And it was because, you know, her head was up here, and I just thought that they would crop here, but they actually cropped here. So doing your 4x6 cropping, having it all on a jump drive and taking it in is really the smart way to go. Then you just plug it in, tell the machine to take them all off, make 1 or 2 prints, and you're done. Have you ever been behind people at those kiosks that are looking at everything and editing on the kiosks too? That happened to me once when I was in a big hurry. And they had just been on an Alaskan cruise. It was this older couple. And they were going through every shot and talking about if they wanted it or not. And then they'd zoom in and they'd crop it and they'd do some things. And then they'd think, and they had like 400 pictures to go through. And I was like, oh, I'm in such a rush. So do this at home. Control what you're getting. Do your own color correcting. Do your own cropping. You guys all can do that because you've all had Photoshop. You know what you're doing. All right, color management is very important. Getting prints to match what you see on your screen can be difficult, and we know that firsthand from what we see here to what we get there, right? So in true workflows, companies are going to be color calibrating daily, weekly for sure, maybe even every few hours. As the monitors warm up, as conditions change, they want to make sure, I'm thinking of like a photo retouching for a high fashion magazine, and a place like that. They want to make exactly sure that what they see is what's getting output in print, period. No changes. So color calibration, I'll bring back at the break what one of these looks like, but you can get them fairly cheaply now if you wanted to do this. It's a device that actually hangs over your monitor and reads the light output and helps calibrate your monitor so that what you see there speaks to what you see on your particular printer. People that do photo retouching, color editing professionally all day, every day, actually work in rooms without windows, without weird lights, and all the walls are painted neutral gray. There's no color bouncing around. It's very, very controlled. So probably not going to be like that at your own house, I'm guessing. Make money with your photos. If your pictures are good enough, you can theoretically sell them as stock photography. You could offer them up to a place like iStock and get paid some amount based on how many people download and use them. The thing is that you give all your rights away. It's no longer your picture. Anybody can use it if they buy it and they use it for something that's not quite what you had in mind. It's bad use of it or something, you have no control over that. You get paid based on how many people buy your photo, so the quality of your images and the quantity sold are really the key. So you guys have been to something like iStock or looking at Adobe stock photos, right? They got there somehow, right? Somebody took them and offered them up as stock photography. I grew up in Minnesota where the Mayo Clinic is and near Rochester. Haven't heard of the Mayo Clinic? Anybody not heard of it? Anyway, it's huge, right? It's the best healthcare in the world, allegedly, and I probably believe it. So a friend of mine has a friend who is a photographer, a real estate photographer, But he also knows a lot of people that work at the Mayo Clinic because, to be honest, 50% of Rochester works at the Mayo Clinic. Like, everybody knows somebody that works there or is a doctor or nurse or whatever. So he somehow got an in at the clinic, and he would go in and take stock photos of like doctors looking at x-ray machines or sitting by machines, medical machines. He's making 10 grand a month on his stock photos as a side gig. So, right? But they were really good photos and really good content, things that people wanted, like for a medical newsletter or something. A generic doctor pointing an x-ray or whatever. So, think about it. It could, if you have a fantastic shot, maybe, and you're willing to give up your rights to it in order to make money, it might be a thought. All right. From the Kelby series, all of them that I've had over the years and some that have been in the best of book that you guys have, here's just some overall general tips for getting better pictures. Moving your point of focus. So those of you with SLRs, you've noticed probably when you're looking through the viewfinder and you hold the shutter down halfway, dots in your viewfinder light up. You guys seen that? Maybe the center one, if you have that one set, maybe all of them if you've told it to kind of meter and focus on everything. But of these dots, you can pick which ones are lit up and which ones you're choosing. On a Canon anyway, I can tell you that. On Canon, it is either this button right here that has all the dots, or it's this one. Once you're in there, as you push it, so this one will light up first. And then as you keep pushing it, it will keep lighting them up one at a time, and then it will light all of them. So if you knew, let's say this is a statue and not a live animal, because a live animal is going to move, right? Let's say this is a statue, it's not moving, and you want to take a bunch of shots of this using the rule of threes, the grid of threes, where you're putting it in that one intersection point. So it's not going to be centered, therefore having this thing light up as your focal point, you would have to aim the center point here, hold down halfway to lock in your focus, and then recompose the picture to get it to be off center, right? That's what you would normally do. If you went into that mode and you pushed the button until this one lit up, and you moved it a little bit, you would never have to do that, focusing and recomposing, moving it. You could set this to be your focal point, and then whatever falls in that area is what gets focused on. So it can be helpful. A lot of times I think most people are comfortable having this one lit up or all of them. But if you ever see a random one of these lighting up all the time, not because something is in that subject, sometimes when you aim, it will automatically, intelligently find something that's behind that dot and light that dot up. But if it's always lighting up this dot and you can't figure out why, it's probably because you have it changed. Okay? So that's something worth looking at. All right, if you're going to zoom in with a big zoom lens, you're going to want to use a fairly fast shutter speed. Think about that. If there is a parrot at the end of this room and I want to zoom in to the point of getting that shot from standing here, I am super zooming, right? So if I cough and make a little bit of a wiggle right here, I'm actually wiggling like 5 feet way down there, right? It's a big wiggle down there. So because of that, in your hand holding, you're going to want to have pretty fast shutter speeds, and it therefore needs to be a pretty bright, sunny day to be that fast. If you're in the shade or anywhere where your shutter is going to go below 1/250th of a second, you're going to want to use a tripod when you're really zoomed like that. 1/250th of a second is fast enough to handhold on a normal distance, but when you're way far out, zooming in, any little bump that you do is going to cause it to really shift a lot and show movement or blur. All right, this one I'm going to hammer away on all the time. Get the best shot you can in camera. Recompose it. Don't say, I'll fix it later in Photoshop. In this case, you can see way down at the bottom right, like the hood of a car or something way down here. All they had to do was move a few feet, lift the camera up a little higher, and that wouldn't have been in there. And this weird little piece that's sticking out and kind of annoying, so we cropped it down. Anything you can do in camera, do. don't rely on Photoshop, because if you're only out taking 5 pictures, no big deal. But if you're out all day or on a vacation and you've got hundreds of pictures and you have to fix a little something on all of them, you're not going to be very happy when you're sitting at your computer for hours and hours and hours. All right, concerts and events. Anybody go to concerts and try to take pictures? And what kind of luck have you had? Yeah. It's a tricky scene, right? Because the stage is extremely professionally lit on purpose. Everything else is relatively dark. And unless you're lucky or got big bucks, you're not usually up close enough to really get the benefit of all that light. You're usually back a ways. So because the stages are specifically lit, your on-camera flash will do nothing. If you're back 20 rows and you pop up your on-camera flash, or it comes up automatically because it's a dark concert, all you're going to do is illuminate the back of the heads and the back of the arms of everybody in front of you. They're going to be bright white, and everything else is going to be crummy. That's just reality. So don't bother with the flash. The key here is to shoot at a high enough ISO that you can get your shutter speed to about 1/125th of a second. So ISO keeps magnifying the existing light in a fake way, right? It takes whatever light it has and it digitally amplifies it. So you want to be able to have a fairly fast shutter speed, because do these people typically sit still on stage? They're always moving around. So you might get the shot, but they're blurry, and that's real common too. So you want to have a reasonably fast shutter speed so you don't have blurry people, and you want to use the fastest lens you have, which means the fastest lens is the one that allows in the most light in however much time you have. Therefore, it has the biggest hole, aperture, so it goes down as low as possible on your f-stops, a 2.8, a 1.8. If you're up at the 5.6 and the 8 zone, you're not really going to get in enough light to make this slow handheld speed work, this 1/25th. Because you're using a high ISO, you're probably going to have noise in your picture, that digital noise and graininess, and then you're going to want to work to fix it. Not too terribly long ago, everybody had to use third-party software, and this Define 2.0 was really what even the pros use, and they had a free trial for it. So that was the one I was sharing at the time. Photoshop now has a fairly decent denoising feature built into it to take out some of that digital noise. And when we work in our other book, that thicker one, which you should start bringing next week, the Kelby Photoshop for Digital Photographers book, there's a couple of exercises we're going to do in there, and we're going to take digital noise out of the picture the best we can using Photoshop and or Camera Raw. Both of those do a good job of it. So concerts are tricky. If you've not done them, high ISO, no flash, go down to the lowest f-stop you can and watch and see where your shutter speed is, because if it's too slow, you're going to get blurry people. So that's the bottom line. And then when you're done and you leave the concert, kick everything back to normal. Take your ISO back down for sure, because if you forget that and you're up at 6400 ISO, the next picture you take is going to be so overblown bright, and it's frustrating because you forgot it. All right, shooting home interiors. So real estate people, anybody that wants to take a cool shot of their house. These can be really tricky. So the key here is light, as much light as possible. So sunny days, bright days help, and turning on every light in the room is going to help also. You want maximum light. Again, a flash is only going to carry so far, maybe 10, 12, 15 feet max. So if you're in a big room, you're going to have dark corners. A flash isn't going to cut it. Unless you have off-camera flashes, like professional grade umbrella flashes, which, I don't know, does anybody own umbrella flashes in this room? So there's that. Make the room look as big as possible by shooting very low with a wide-angle lens and going corner to corner. Because if you think about math and you look at a rectangle, the longest distance is the kitty corner distance, right? That's how the room looks the biggest. So go into a corner, get kind of low, and shoot at that widest angle and use a wide-angle lens so you're getting everything you can left to right. Bright window light. So camera won't properly expose for what's inside the room and what's outside the room if it's a bright sunny day. So quite often it blows out what's in the windows. You can see how we have very little detail here in these windows, and that's okay. But what if this is Malibu and what's out here is the ocean, and that's part of the selling, like, oh my God, that has to be in the picture. Well, a couple of things. You need to have a good enough exposure for this room and for out there. You can't do it in one shot. So we can do 2 different shots with different exposures, one to get the room right, one to get the outside of the house right. Or we can bring this into Photoshop or Camera Raw, and we can do some editing back here, and we can actually get detail out of these highlights. So if there is something back here we're seeing, like mountains or water or whatever, if this is not blowing out pure white, because we can't reclaim anything from pure white, if there's some detail in there, we can actually retrieve it using software. All right. I am not entirely sure, to be honest, if this link is still going to work, but we'll try it. If not, I know I show you this when we practice this on our own. Oh, good. All right, this is the one. More and save. Let me get the volume cranked up. So all of these Kelby books that we're using have online extras, if you will. This was from when he was writing multiple versions of this book, the book 3. This was some of the videos that went with that. So in the back of your book or the front of it, it's going to tell you where any videos for that book are located. And then when we get to the big Kelby book, all of the photos that he gives tutorials on in that book are all available to be downloaded, so you can practice with those exact photos, which we'll do. I've already downloaded the chapters that we're going to do in class, and I'll have them for you to download that day. But anything else that we don't cover in that book that you want to learn about, those files are available to you, which is pretty cool.
Kelby here, we're looking at the problem that I talked about in the book, which is when you have an interior and the outside is blown out and all you can see is the inside.
By the way, even though this says Photoshop way up top, this is another window floating in it, and this is Camera Raw, that extra software when you take a picture in RAW format that pops up with all these options that I briefly showed you. So this is another reason why, if you can shoot in Camera Raw, for any important picture, do it, because then you're going to have all these options.
Well, a lot of times in architectural photography, unless there's something really compelling outside, it's okay to leave the windows blown out. It's very, very popular. You see it even in big, fine home magazines where the windows are blown out. This is a relatively new style, but it's now accepted. But if what's outside the window is important, then I'm going to show you how to combine the two. First off, let's go see if there is anything outside the window. We're in Camera Raw, so this was shot in RAW. And by the way, whether you have shot in RAW or in JPEG or in TIFF, you can use Camera Raw inside of Elements or inside of Photoshop to open your image. We're going to go to the exposure slider and lower it right over here and see if we can see anything outside the window. Oh yeah, there's mountains out there, there's blue sky, there's all kinds of stuff that your camera couldn't possibly expose for out there. So there is some interesting things outside the window. So the problem is we need 2 photographs, one that shows the outside and then one that shows the inside. So what we're going to do is let's create first the one that shows the outside. Let's lower the exposure quite a bit like this so we can see out the window, and we'll just hit Open Image, which is just below the screen, a button that says Open Image. And this will be one of the 2 photographs that we need to combine. So here's the outside look. Now just go right back to Open Recent. We're going to open the same image that we just had open. And then we're going to go back and set it back to its the defaults. So now you just do the image, however you normally want to do it. Kind of make it look nice and maybe increase the black. So, okay, there we go. So there's our image. We'll hit Open. So now we're going to have 2 copies of the same image. One that's exposed for the outside the window area, and one that's exposed for the inside of the window area, the room. Now, hold the Shift key on Mac or it's just the Shift key whether you're on Mac or Windows, and you're going to drag and drop this brighter image onto the darker image. So just Shift, click, and drag. All right, and then we can close the other one. We don't need it anymore. Now we have two versions of the image on separate layers over here. The background layer is the darker one, and then sitting perfectly aligned directly on top of it is this one. And then the reason I know that they're perfectly aligned with each other is that's what holding the shift key does. The shift key aligns them as you drag between documents. Okay, now, here's what we're going to do. There's two different ways that you can do this. The first way will work a certain percentage of the time. I would always try this first because if it works, your job is going to be very easy. Go to the thumbnail and just double click on it. Just double click on it, brings up this layer style dialog box, but you're really in the blending options dialog. And if you don't want to do it that way, you can just go down here and choose, over to the FX menu and choose blending options. Brings up this dialog. See these sliders down here? You're going to hold the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on PC, and that will split this slider on the top right in half. And watch what happens. It just brings in the outside. You can decide how much you want to bring in, probably not that much. Maybe something in this area here, but make sure it splits. It didn't really split there. There we go. Now let me just move this out of the way a little so you can see a little better. See how that is? See how it kind of brings in the outside? And at the same time, see the reflection over here that was bright, white, completely blown out? It also brings some detail back in there. Always try that one first, because that is the quickest way to get there if you want to. And then you can click OK. And now, of course, you have full control over the opacity of the top layer if you want. Now, that's one way to do it. Let's undo that. Let's just go undo and start over. Now, the other way is going to be trickier. The other way is you're going to have to mask away that window to reveal the one below. Or let's just do this instead, actually. Let's double click on the background layer, make it a layer, and drag it on top. So now we've got on the bottom the regularly exposed image, and on top the other image. Hold the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on PC and click on this little icon right here. And this puts a black mask over the darker version of the image. What that means is that layer's still there, but you can't see it because it's hidden under this black mask. So then here's what we're going to do. Now follow along because it's going to seem a little tricky, but it's really not. First, move your cursor on the layers palette. See me moving over here? Move over and click on the photo itself. So we're no longer working on the mask, we're on the photo. Go get the magic wand tool and click inside this bright area. Hold the shift key so we can continue clicking until the whole area inside there is selected. Then go to the next window pane and select that, and the next one, and the next one, and we're going to select all these areas. You might have to click a bunch of times to get all of this selected, especially down here where you're starting to select some of the ground. It will take a while. If you go too far, just hit Command Z on Mac or Control Z on PC. Now, if you're on Photoshop CS4, there's a tool called the Quick Selection tool, and that will help you just hold the Shift key down and add that right in there. There we go. We just add these other areas just by painting over them. Now we've pretty much got everything outside the window selected. Now is when you're going to, so this little area right up. There we go. Now we're going to switch to the mask. Go over to the layers panel and click on that black mask. Now, if it's solid black, you need to paint in white. So you can either take a paintbrush and just paint in the windows like that, and it'll only paint inside the window pane. Well, that's probably actually what it's going to do right there. It'll only paint inside the window pane. And you can see a little area that I missed there. But you get the idea. Now, the other thing is now you have control over how bright it really is, because you have the opacity slider. See, I'm over here in the layers palette. I can lower the opacity and control the brightness of what you see out there. So that's a couple different ways on how to control what happens inside and outside the window by combining the two. Exposures, and it's just kind of a brief look at it, but that is the technique we use, something along those lines there.
Makes sense. You guys know masking, so yeah. It's kind of also what he did is a little bit of what we're going to do in a couple weeks when we do HDR, high dynamic range. We're going to take an image, and if we didn't take 3 shots of it in real life, so today you're out there, you take a regular exposure, a way too bright and a way too dark. If you didn't do that, if you only took 1 shot, we would bring it into Camera Raw, we would correct it to be the perfect shot, we'd save that, then we'd open it again in Camera Raw and we'd make it super dark using the exposure and the things we saw. save that as that version dark. We'd open it again in Camera Raw, make it really bright, and then we'd have 3 versions that we would merge in the HDR software. So that's going to be fun. Actually, those are some cool pictures. So that's home interiors. All right, shooting night scenes. I think we've had this one already. We talked about depending on where you meter, it's not going to be right. So if you meter for something really dark, it's going to say, okay, I need to have a lot more light here. I need to get details up here, and in the process, you're going to make everything else too bright. If you meter on a super bright spot, it's going to darken it up to get some detail, and it's going to darken everything else. So metering in a midpoint is pretty important, and then looking at your LCD screen, we talked about how that's not perfect. It's too bright. So look at your histogram and see, do I have any spikes in the white? Do I have blown out light? And if you do, maybe it's okay. Maybe in this case, it might be this reflection right here, and you don't really care. Everything else you can see detail in. It's only that one spike. Or is my image too dark or too bright? And again, if you look at this, how many of these pixels, if each square had a number, in percentage-wise, how many of these are dark? A lot of them, right? Like maybe 70 or 80% of this image is a dark pixel. So our histogram is going to be more over here. There's not many white pixels, so you got to kind of use some logic. It's not like it has to be a certain shape. All right, tips and tricks for low light situations. So if you have to shoot in low light without a tripod, and you don't want to crank up your ISO too many times, consider shooting in burst mode or continuous speed mode. Chances are at least one of these shots is going to be in focus. This burst mode works really well with casual portraits too, and we talked about that when we're taking pictures of people or groups. If you're in burst mode, when you tell them and they keep moving around, it's like the first one kind of is a really stiff smile, and by the second or third one it's more natural. Maybe at the end people are laughing and having fun, and that proves to be the shot that you really like the best. So hopefully on that getting to know your camera worksheet, you guys have all looked and found out if your camera has burst mode. So anybody with an SLR, you've got it, right? How about the point and shoots? Were any of you able to find a burst mode on a point and shoot? Yes? Okay. Continuous burst? Okay, good. So that's a really good tip for low light and for those casual portraits. All right, that is it for the first